One quiet Sunday afternoon, I found myself sitting in my in-laws' living room, surrounded by family members who used to feel like extended arms of comfort. That day, they felt like strangers with polite smiles masking sharpened blades. My brother-in-law, Ryan, wasn't even there yet, but his shadow loomed large in the room. Everyone was gathered with one intention, something I didn't see coming until it was too late. The air was heavy with tension disguised as civility. My mother-in-law passed out homemade cookies like it was any other family gathering. My father-in-law cleared his throat with authority, and my husband, Brian, sat beside me, rigid, unreadable. That's when it started. My father-in-law said they'd all discussed Ryan's financial trouble and had come to a solution. A vote. An actual vote. To protect the family's future, he said. They wanted me to give Ryan $18,000 to help him out of yet another failed business scheme. And since I was the one with savings, they figured this would be the easiest path forward. Then came the part that made me realize I was no longer a wife or a daughter-in-law in their eyes, I was a walking, talking wallet. My refusal didn't matter. They said, "We've already voted. Majority rules." I turned to Brian. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. He just looked away. I took a deep breath, steadied my hands, and smiled. "Then let's vote on something else," I said. And that was the moment everything changed. But before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I met Brian 8 years ago on a rainy Tuesday at a coffee shop near the hospital where I worked. He was charming in a soft, unassuming way, nothing flashy, just kind eyes and a calming presence. I was fresh off a 12-hour shift in the OR, still in my scrubs, hair tied back, exhausted and soaked. He offered to pay for my coffee because my card wouldn't swipe. That small gesture snowballed into lunch, then dinner, and within a year, we were married. At the time, I thought I'd finally found someone solid. Someone who didn't flinch at my crazy hours or my independence. Brian was in real estate, good with people, always polite, always agreeable. For a while, I thought he was my anchor. Then came the Sundays. The Mitchell family had a tradition, every Sunday dinner was sacred. It was never just a meal, it was a performance. You dressed well, you brought a dish, and you sat at that long oak table while Brian's parents held court like it was a corporate boardroom. Everyone had a role to play. At first, I tried. I really did. I brought casseroles, I complimented the centerpieces, I laughed at their inside jokes. But I always felt peripheral. Not disliked, exactly, but not accepted either. Like I was on probation and didn't even know the rules of the game. And then there was Ryan. Ryan, Brian's younger brother by 5 years, was the family's golden boy with a broken compass. Tall, charming, always spinning the next big idea. Crypto investments, dropshipping gadgets, buying and flipping motorcycles, he had a new plan every month. And every plan failed. He lived with his parents well into his 30s, rarely held a job for more than a few months, and yet the family treated him like a misunderstood genius. He just hasn't found his calling yet, they'd say. He's ambitious. What he really was entitled. I watched him bounce from scheme to scheme, each time crashing and blaming the market, his partners, bad luck, never himself. Meanwhile, I worked double shifts to save for a house, carefully planned our finances, and built a life brick by brick. The first time I questioned Ryan's behavior out loud, Brian went quiet. That was the first small crack in our foundation. I remember asking, "Don't you think your brother needs to take some responsibility?" And Brian responded with, "You just don't understand how hard things have been for him." That's when I realized something unsettling. I was expected to carry my weight, and Ryan's too. And it was only a matter of time before that expectation became a demand. The demand came wrapped in guilt and delivered with a smile. It started on a Monday evening after work. I came home to find Brian sitting at the kitchen table with that look, the one that said he was trying to seem calm but was already bracing for a no. His fingers were drumming on the table. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. "Hey," he said. Ryan stopped by today. I didn't respond right away. I just dropped my bag by the door and waited. He's in a tough spot, Brian continued. One of his business partners backed out of a deal last minute. They were about to launch this, subscription box service for niche auto parts. Very specific market. I raised an eyebrow. He just needs a little help, like $18,000 worth of help, Brian said, trying to sound casual, like he was asking for a ride to the airport. I laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, just surprised. You're kidding, right? Brian didn't laugh. He says it's only for a few months. He already has a repayment plan mapped out. He just needs the cash flow to stabilize things. I stared at him. Brian. Your brother has failed at every business he's touched. We both know this. Come on, he said. He's trying. No, I said, firmly. $18,000 is not a small ask. That's more than our emergency fund. That's money we've saved for a house. I'm not giving that to your brother so he can buy inventory for some half-baked car parts scheme. Brian didn't fight me. He just sat there, blinking like I'd slapped him. He looked disappointed, but not surprised. And that was the part that stung. He already knew I'd say no, and yet he asked anyway. I told him I'd talk to you, he said quietly. I told him we'd consider it. That night, I barely slept. Not because I felt guilty, but because something shifted. I realized that Brian didn't see me as an equal partner anymore, he saw me as a resource. Someone to negotiate with. Someone to convince. The next weekend, we got the call from his mother. We're having a little family meeting on Sunday, she said sweetly. We'd love for you to come. Just some things to discuss, nothing serious. The tone was polite. The words were harmless. But my gut twisted. Something about the way she said meeting, like it was already decided and I just hadn't been told. I almost said no. Almost made up an excuse. But I didn't. Because something told me, this wasn't just a meeting. It was an ambush waiting to happen. The house smelled like cinnamon and deceit. I stepped into my in-laws' living room that Sunday afternoon, instantly hit by the warmth of apple pie in the oven and the weight of eyes on me. Everyone was already there, Brian's parents on the couch, his sister Morgan in the armchair, his younger brother Jason lingering near the window, and of course, Brian, pacing slightly before pretending he wasn't. And then there was Ryan. He stood near the fireplace, all casual confidence and faux humility, like a salesman who believed his own pitch. He smiled when I walked in, the kind of smile that assumed forgiveness before it was earned. I didn't sit down right away. I scanned the room, reading the tension like static in the air. Everyone looked up at me, some smiling too wide, others avoiding my eyes completely. Brian gestured to the empty chair beside him. Come sit, babe. I didn't move. Brian's father cleared his throat. We just wanted to have a little family discussion. About something important. Something that affects all of us. Ryan? I asked flatly. He blinked, surprised by my directness. Brian's mother jumped in, voice sticky sweet. He's family. And family helps family. Then it began. A slow, careful build-up about hard times, how Ryan had made some poor decisions, but always with the best intentions. How this new business was different. How he just needed a little bridge to get him through a rough patch. Then Brian's father said it. We thought it might be best to put it to a vote. I blinked. Excuse me? We're all stakeholders in this family, he explained, as if this was a boardroom and I was an underperforming asset. So, majority rules. We all get one vote. I looked at Brian. You're kidding. He didn't look at me. He didn't say a word. They went around the room. Brian's parents voted yes. Jason hesitated, then nodded. Morgan looked uncomfortable, but eventually whispered, yes. Brian was last. He hesitated, then nodded. 4-1. I was the one. Then they all looked at me like I was supposed to smile and say thank you for the opportunity to be included. I looked around the room, slowly. Then I smiled. Okay, I said softly. If we're voting on things, I have something else we can vote on. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope. Everyone watched, confused, as I laid it on the coffee table. This, I said, tapping it gently, is an updated copy of our prenuptial agreement, including a new amendment filed 6 weeks ago. And these, I said, holding up another document, are the deed and mortgage documents for our house. You'll notice whose name is on them. Silence. Then confusion. Then Ryan laughed. What are you doing? I looked at Brian, who was pale now. Since we're voting, let's vote on whether I should stay married to a man who let his entire family try to corner me like I'm just a bank account with lipstick. Still, he said nothing. You wanted majority rule? I said. Fine. I vote to walk. And the room fell apart. Ryan walked in just as the room was starting to buzz with the shock of my words. He was holding a bottle of wine, cheap, not even chilled, and smiling like he'd just won something. What did I miss? He said, looking around, clearly sensing the tension but not realizing it was about him. Nobody answered. I didn't bother hiding my disgust. Perfect timing, Ryan. We were just talking about you. He froze mid-step. Okay. Should I be flattered or worried? Worried, Morgan said quietly. He blinked. What? Morgan stood up slowly, her hands clenched. I gave you $10,000 last year, Ryan. You said it was to finish the payment on that delivery van. You never paid me back. You never even mentioned it again. Ryan laughed, nervous. Morgan, come on. That was a loan between siblings. I told you I'd pay you when the business took off. You said 6 weeks, she snapped. It's been over a year. Jason stood too, rubbing the back of his neck. I gave you $5,000. You said it was for licensing fees for some new crypto exchange. Brian's father looked stunned. Jason? Jason nodded. Yeah. He said he didn't want to ask Mom and Dad again. I thought I was helping. Ryan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked at each of us like we'd all turned into strangers. Okay, he said finally. That's enough. I took a step toward him. Is it? Or should we talk about the business you tried to start under my name? Or the bank that called last month about a flagged application? He shook his head. No. No. That wasn't me. You can't prove that. Oh, but I can, I said. Morgan kept records. Emails, transactions. And I've already spoken to the bank. They confirmed the application was submitted using my social security number. Ryan looked to Brian, almost pleading now. You're just gonna let her say all this? Brian didn't speak. Just kept staring at the floor like if he stayed quiet long enough, he'd disappear. Don't look at him, I snapped. You brought this on yourself. Then Brian's father, the man who had minutes ago demanded a family vote, slammed his palm on the table. Enough. Everyone jumped. He pointed at Ryan. I've defended you your whole life. Every mistake, every lie, every mess. And you repay us by stealing from your siblings? From your sister-in-law? I didn't steal. Ryan shouted. Then where's the money? Jason asked. Ryan's jaw clenched. I had to use it. Things didn't go the way I thought. That's what you always say. Morgan shouted. And suddenly, they were all yelling. Accusations flying across the room. Old debts. Broken promises. Years of resentment cracking open like fault lines. And Ryan, he just stood there, exposed, surrounded, unraveling in real time. Eventually, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the wine bottle fell and shattered on the floor. Nobody chased after him. And in that moment, with glass on the carpet and silence settling in, I realized something. This family didn't need a vote. It needed a reckoning. And I had just started one. Brian stayed seated even after the door slammed. His shoulders were hunched, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was praying, but for what, I couldn't guess. I picked up my bag from beside my chair, calmly looped it over my shoulder, and looked at him. You have something to say? He finally looked up, not with guilt or regret, just confusion. When did you change the prenup? He asked. Not I'm sorry. Not are you okay? Not even Ryan lied to me too. Just that. I blinked. That's your question? You changed it without telling me, he said, as if that was the betrayal. I stared at him for a long second. 6 weeks ago. Right after Ryan's brilliant idea for a real estate flipping app and that mystery investor he needed me to meet. His mouth twitched. You never said no before. And you never asked me to risk everything before, I said. Behind me, Brian's mother was crying softly into a tissue. Brian's father had gone quiet, looking more tired than angry now. The energy in the room had shifted. No more righteousness. Just exhaustion and cracks they couldn't glue back together. I turned to the rest of them. I'm leaving now. Don't call me. Don't email me. I don't want explanations. And I especially don't want another vote. Please, Brian's mom said between sniffles. This family voted, I cut her off. And I'm respecting the outcome. Brian made a move to stand, maybe to follow me, maybe to argue, but I lifted a hand. Don't. He froze mid-rise. I walked to the door. My heels were the only sound in the room now. No one tried to stop me. When I reached my car and shut the door, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Morgan. Morgan, I know things you don't. You deserve the full truth. Meet me tomorrow? I stared at the screen. Truth? I thought I'd just heard it all. But something in my gut said otherwise. That night, I didn't sleep. Because if Morgan was right, if there was more, I had no idea just how deep this betrayal went. The next morning, I met Morgan at a quiet little cafe on the edge of town. The kind with chipped mugs, local artwork on the walls, and a waitress who called everyone Han. It was the kind of place where real conversations happened, without pretense, without performance. Morgan was already there, seated by the window, 2 coffees on the table. Her hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, and her eyes, normally so wide and warm, were sharp, tired, but focused. I'm glad you came, she said. I sat across from her, still raw from the night before. You said you knew things I didn't. About what? She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup but didn't drink. I waited for someone, anyone, to finally see what Ryan was. And maybe what Brian became, too. My throat tightened. What do you mean? She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder, worn at the edges. She slid it toward me. Start with the emails. I opened it slowly. The first page was a printed email thread between Ryan and Brian. My eyes scanned the text: plans for a crypto investment scheme, discussion of using joint family funds, hiding losses under home improvements. My heart dropped. I thought Ryan ran those scams alone, I whispered. Morgan shook her head. He didn't. Brian was in it with him. From the beginning. She pulled out a second stack of papers. Bank statements. Transfer records. A total of $60,000 moved from my and Brian's joint savings into a separate account with both Ryan and Brian's names attached. How did he explain that money to me? I asked, more to myself. Morgan answered anyway. He told you it was for foundation repair, right? That big crack in the back patio? I nodded numbly. She pulled out the contractor invoice. A fake. The company name didn't exist. The phone number went nowhere. And then came the worst part. He and Ryan visited your parents 2 months ago, Morgan said gently. Said you were starting a boutique medical investment. Asked for $20,000 in seed money. Said it was your idea but that you were too busy to ask them yourself. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My parents? She nodded. Your mom was suspicious. Your dad wrote the check. I stared down at the papers in front of me, suddenly seeing not documents, but daggers. And every single one had Brian's fingerprints on it. How do you know all this? I finally asked. I used to believe in Ryan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I dated him. I gave him money. I defended him. And I kept every piece of evidence after he ghosted me. You were in love with him, I said softly. I was stupid, she replied. But I'm not anymore. And neither are you. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she leaned in. If you're going to take them down, you'll need more than anger. You'll need precision. And I can help you. I looked at her. For the first time since this nightmare started, I didn't feel alone. Send me everything, I said. I'm done playing their game. It's my turn now. I spent the next 48 hours doing what I do best, researching, documenting, connecting dots that Brian and Ryan thought they had buried beneath a mess of lies and familial loyalty. Morgan was meticulous. She sent me spreadsheets that mapped out every transaction, every PayPal transfer, every sudden cash withdrawal over the past 2 years. Cross-referenced with dates when Brian told me he was traveling for work or paying off a contractor. Turns out, a good chunk of those funds were funneled into an account I'd never seen before. An account held under a business name that didn't exist outside of a quick LLC registration, one that listed Ryan and Brian as co-founders. I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop glowing in the dark, a notebook full of dates, lies, and deception scribbled in red ink. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated theft disguised as brotherly loyalty and marital trust. Even worse, there were 2 credit cards opened under my name. One was used to pay for a luxury rental in Jersey City, the same week Brian told me he was at a conference in Buffalo. Another had a suspicious string of purchases, electronics, hotel stays, a dinner at a restaurant I'd only seen on TV. I called the credit card companies. Filed fraud reports. Froze my credit. Then I went digging deeper. I found a shared Dropbox folder Ryan forgot to lock properly. Inside, marketing materials for a financial coaching venture, filled with recycled jargon, cheap logo designs, and a video pitch, featuring Brian. He stood in front of a brick wall, smiling like a game show host. Hi, I'm Brian. I help busy professionals find financial freedom. I nearly laughed. When the nausea passed, I realized something else. This wasn't just about money. It was about power. They used my trust like a bank. And when I finally said no, they panicked, not because they needed me, but because I was the last domino holding their story together. Then the phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Sweetheart, she said, overly sweet, we're doing dinner this Sunday. The usual time. Hope you and Brian can make it. I almost said no. I almost hung up. But then I remembered what Morgan said, if I was going to do this, I needed them all in one place. So I said yes. And then I began preparing my own kind of dinner party gift, a stack of printed bank statements, forged invoices, screenshots, and one final envelope, labeled simply with Brian's name. Sunday dinner at the Westwood House always followed the same rhythm, 6 p.m. sharp, pot roast from the slow cooker, and forced small talk under the flickering chandelier that hadn't been updated since 1992. But this time everything felt staged. Like the actors were reading from a script they didn't know I'd already rewritten. Brian sat next to me, his phone never leaving his hand, thumbs twitching across the screen. He made a few empty attempts at conversation, but his words floated in the air like dust motes, weightless, meaningless. My mother-in-law fluttered around the table, ladling gravy like it was a peace offering. My father-in-law said grace with extra emphasis, like invoking the Lord might keep the tension from cracking the windows. Ryan wasn't there. He was the only one missing, which was suspicious in itself. The roast was halfway carved, the wine poured, when I set down my fork and stood up. I said clearly, it's time for another family vote. Utensils clinked against plates. Silence, so thick I could have sliced it like the roast beef. Brian looked up, blinking. What are you talking about? I reached down and pulled a manila folder from my bag. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I just laid out the papers, one by one, across the table like a magician revealing her final trick. Bank statements. Transfer logs. Screenshots of emails with timestamps. The Dropbox folder index. The LLC registration. The fraudulent credit card activity. Every piece arranged with surgical precision. My father-in-law leaned forward, reading. My mother-in-law's smile faded like a candle blown out too fast. Brian's face paled, then flushed, then settled into something close to rage. Where did you get all of this? Where do you think? I replied. I've been married to you for 8 years, Brian. You think I wouldn't notice the way your lies started to rhyme? He stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood. You're making this look worse than it is. You're blowing everything out of. Am I? I interrupted. Tell them about the business you started with Ryan. Tell them about the credit cards you opened in my name. Or better yet, tell them what Ryan knows about your little legal issue at work that you covered up 5 years ago. He went still. Like a statue trying not to fall apart. I turned to his parents. Did you know Ryan never acted alone? Did you know Brian helped move the money, sign the paperwork, cover the trail? Or did you only care when I refused to write the check? My mother-in-law opened her mouth, then closed it. My father-in-law looked at Brian. Is it true? Brian swallowed hard. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I was going to fix it. I just needed time. No, I said quietly. You needed me to stay blind. And then I pulled out the final envelope and slid it across the table. The divorce papers. Everyone froze. Brian's hand hovered, but he didn't touch it. I'm voting to leave, I said. And I think that's one vote that doesn't need to be unanimous. And just like that, I turned and walked away, out of the house, through the cold night air. No one stopped me. No one could. Because for the first time in a long time, the only vote that mattered was mine. That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a quiet boutique hotel across town. The kind of place with crisp white sheets and no memories. I stood in the shower until the water ran cold, letting everything, 8 years of frustration, denial, betrayal, drain off me and disappear down the pipes. My phone buzzed nonstop. 12 missed calls from Brian. 3 voicemails I didn't listen to. 1 long text that started with, "Can we please talk?" and ended with, "You're overreacting." Morgan texted just after midnight. He left. No one stopped him. You were brilliant tonight. I stared at her message, trying to decide what I felt. Relief? Anger? Sadness? All of them, maybe. But underneath it all, I felt something else, stillness. For the first time in years, there was no chaos waiting for me at home. No guilt to negotiate. No explanations to prepare. Just quiet. 2 days later, I filed for divorce. Thanks to the airtight prenup, yes, the one I had revised 6 weeks ago, everything moved quickly. I kept the house. My savings. My retirement accounts. Brian's lawyer tried to argue, but the documentation was too clean, too thorough. Morgan's files, emails, texts, screenshots, bank transfers, told a story that couldn't be undone. Ryan vanished. His social media accounts were deleted. Rumor had it he was trying to launch a new crypto project under a fake name somewhere in New Jersey. Good luck with that. Brian moved back in with his parents. Morgan told me he barely spoke. He looked like a shadow of the man I once knew, like someone who'd lost the only compass he ever had. The family dinner stopped. The group chat went silent. The Great Mitchell Sunday night tradition dissolved without anyone officially declaring it over. It just died. And I didn't miss it. I was rebuilding. Quietly. Patiently. In my own time. Healing is a strange thing. Some days it feels like progress. Others, like you're wading through fog, one breath at a time. For a while, I thought I was broken. I questioned everything, my judgment, my worth, even my past. How could I have shared my life with someone who saw me as a means to an end? How did I not see it sooner? There were nights I cried myself to sleep. Nights I replayed the dinner scene, asking myself if I'd gone too far. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who finally stood up for herself. Who stopped apologizing for setting boundaries. Who refused to be a silent participant in her own exploitation. The hardest part wasn't leaving Brian. It was unlearning the version of myself I had become in that house. The good wife. The peacemaker. The one who gave too much and asked for too little. That woman is gone. And in her place stands someone stronger. Smarter. And, maybe most importantly, someone who finally knows how to say no, and mean it. I still work long shifts at the hospital, still take my coffee with way too much cream, and still love old Motown on rainy mornings. But something fundamental has shifted. I no longer feel like I owe anyone my silence. Or my savings. Or my loyalty just because we share a last name. One afternoon, I passed by the Mitchell house. It looked smaller than I remembered. A shell. A memory I didn't need to revisit. I smiled, turned up the volume on my playlist, and kept driving. I built something better. Not just a life, but a self. One I trust now, deeply. One I protect fiercely. And every time someone says, "But your family," I remember that night and remind myself. You don't need a vote to walk away from a burning house. You just need the courage to open the door. And I did. In the end, this wasn't just a story about money. It was about value, who sees yours, and who tries to take it for granted. She didn't just walk away from betrayal, she walked into a life where her boundaries mattered. What would you have done in her shoes? Let us know in the comments, type yes if you loved this story, or no if you think she should have done more. And if you don't want to miss the next wild, jaw-dropping tale, hit that subscribe button now. Your next favorite story drops tomorrow, and trust me, it's going to be unforgettable.